Good afternoon, Virgo. There is something shifting in the architecture of your life right now. Not loudly, not with announcement, but with the specific, unmistakable weight of something that is actually real. Something that has been rearranging itself beneath the surface of your ordinary days without asking your permission, without waiting for you to feel ready, without giving you the luxury of a clean beginning or a clear instruction manual, just moving, quietly and persistently moving. And the role you've been playing in your own story is not the same role it was. Even if you haven't fully named that yet, even if the change hasn't announced itself in language you can hold, something has shifted in what you are in relation to the people around you, in what you are in relation to your own life. And that shift is bigger than it looks from the inside. Drop a comment if you've been feeling like something fundamental is changing in who you are, but you don't quite have the words for it yet, because I want to start with something specific. The word impossible, because it sits at the center of this reading and it deserves real attention. Impossible is a word that belongs to a previous version of your understanding. It is a word that describes the limits of what a past version of you believed was available, was realistic, was within the range of what someone like you, in circumstances like yours, with a history like the one you've been carrying, cold, actually access. And those limits were real. They were not imagined. They were built from actual experience, from actual evidence gathered over actual time, from the specific accumulation of moments where reaching produced disappointment, often enough that the nervous system made a quiet executive decision. Stop reaching so far. Stay within what is provable. Protect yourself from the specific pain of wanting something that turns out to be unavailable. That decision was intelligent. It was protective. It made complete sense given what you had been through, but it was made in a context that no longer fully applies. And the impossible that is happening right now is happening precisely in the gap between that old protective limit and what is actually available to you now. Can you feel that gap, the space between what you trained yourself to expect and what is actually beginning to appear? Tell me in the comments, because I want to talk about roles, what they actually are, not in a theatrical sense, in the deep, lived, identity shaping sense. A role is the answer to the question, who am I in this situation? Who am I in this relationship? Who am I in this professional context? Who am I in my own story? And most people answer those questions once early in their lives and then spend decades unconsciously living inside those answers, even when the answers no longer fit, even when they were never entirely accurate to begin with, even when the person asking the question has grown so significantly beyond the original answer that the answer is now more limitation than description. you have been living inside some old answers about who you are in relation to other people, about what you are capable of, about what category of experience is available to someone with your particular history, and the impossible that is happening right now is the beginning of those old answers becoming insufficient, becoming too small to contain what you actually are, becoming visible as the constructions they always were, rather than the permanent truths you mistook them for. Which old answer about yourself is starting to feel too small right now? Drop a comment if something specific comes to mind. Now, let me talk about what it actually feels like when a role shifts, because it is not always comfortable, and I don't want to paint it as purely expansive and exciting without acknowledging the disorientation underneath it. When the role you've been playing changes, when the identity structure you've been operating from starts to move, there is a period of genuine uncertainty where the old way of being no longer fits, but the new way hasn't fully arrived yet, where you're too far from who you were to go back comfortably, but not yet settled. Enough in who you're becoming to move forward with full confidence. That in between place, that threshold space, it is uncomfortable in a very specific way. It feels like instability, like the ground under your particular understanding of yourself is less solid than it was. Like the answers you relied on to navigate your life are suddenly less reliable than they used to be. And that instability is not a problem. It is the sensation of actual growth, of an identity that is expanding beyond its previous boundaries, of a life that is in the process of becoming something larger than its previous configuration. Have you been feeling that specific disorientation lately? That sense of being between versions of yourself? Tell me in the comments. Because here is the probability I want to name directly. The role that is shifting for you right now is not a minor adjustment. It is a fundamental reconfiguration of how you show up in your relationships, in your professional life, in the way you move through spaces and conversations and opportunities, in the way you hold yourself in the moments that matter. There is a version of you that is becoming visible that has always existed underneath the protective layers, underneath the carefully managed presentation, underneath the strategic smallness that kept you safe in environments that couldn't handle your full size. That version has been waiting patiently, sometimes impatiently, for the conditions to be right enough, for the safety to be real enough, for the internal foundation to be solid enough to finally step into the full dimension of what you actually are. And the probability that those conditions are closer to being met right now than they have ever been before is what keeps rising in your field. Can you feel the approaching permission to take up more space? Drop a comment if that resonates somewhere specific. Now I want to talk about the people around you, because a role shift doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in relationship, in the reactions of the people who have known you in the previous configuration and encountering the emerging new one. And those reactions are going to be varied. Some people in your life are going to expand with you. They are going to meet the new version of you with recognition, with the specific warmth of someone who always sensed this was there and is relieved to finally see it arriving at the surface. These people are going to become more important, more central, more genuinely nourishing in the new configuration of your life. But there will be others, people who were comfortable with the previous version, who benefited, consciously or not, from the particular ways you made yourself smaller, who found the manageable version of you easier to be around than the full version is going to be. And those people, they may respond to your expansion with something that looks like support on the surface, but feels like resistance underneath. The probability that navigating those two different categories of response is part of what this period is asking of you is something worth preparing for, honestly. Can you already feel which people in your life are expanding with you and which ones are more comfortable with the version of you that was easier to contain? Tell me in the comments, because I want to address something now that I think is sitting quietly underneath your attention to this reading. The fear that the impossible might not hold, that the shift might be temporary, that you'll step into this new role and something will happen to contract it back, to return you to the previous configuration, to prove that the expansion was premature or unearned or unsustainable. I hear that fear. It makes complete sense given the history of a person who has reached before and had the reach not land the way they hoped. But I want to offer you something to sit alongside it. The shifts that come from genuine internal development are different from the shifts that come from external circumstances. External circumstances change, they fluctuate, they give and take back. But internal development, the kind that comes from real experience, real reflection, real willingness to examine yourself honestly and grow from what you find, that doesn't get revoked, that is permanent in the way that only things built from the inside out are permanent. And what is shifting in you right now is that kind of shift built from the inside, from the actual work you've done on yourself, from the actual growth that happened in the difficult periods, from the actual expansion of your capacity that came through navigating real challenges with genuine presence. That foundation is not going anywhere. Can you feel the difference between a shift that depends on external conditions and one that is rooted in who you have actually become? Drop a comment if that distinction lands somewhere important. Let me talk about the forever, because the title says this will change your life forever, and I want to be honest about what forever actually means in this context. Not that everything will be perfect indefinitely, not that the road from here is without difficulty or setback or the ordinary complexity of a human life. But forever, in this sense, means you cannot go back. Not because the door behind you is locked, but because the version of you that existed before this shift is no longer the most accurate description of who you are. And once your own understanding of yourself has genuinely expanded, once you have seen yourself more clearly and fully and honestly than before, the old, smaller understanding loses its grip. It becomes available as an option rather than a default, a place you could theoretically return to, but would have to consciously choose, rather than a place you simply inhabit without examination. And the probability of you consciously choosing to return to a smaller version of yourself, once you have genuinely inhabited the larger one, is very low, because the larger one fits in the way that things fit when they're actually true, in the way that feels like relief rather than performance, in the way that makes the smaller version feel like borrowed clothing rather than your own skin. Have you already had a taste of that larger version? A moment where you showed up more fully than usual and felt how right it was? Tell me in the comments, because I want to spend a moment here in this specific place, the place where impossible becomes possible, because that transition, that specific moment where the boundary between what you believed was available and what is actually available begins to dissolve. It has a particular quality. It doesn't feel like triumph, not at first. It feels more like .co and fusion, a pleasant confusion. The confusion of someone who prepared themselves for a wall and found a door instead, who braced for resistance and encountered openness, who expected the old familiar ceiling and found the ceiling was gone. And that confusion, that disoriented, slightly breathless quality of something being easier than you were prepared for, is what the leading edge of impossible becoming possible actually feels like. Not fireworks, not certainty, just the strange and beautiful experience of something working that you had stopped fully believing would work. Have you felt any version of that recently? Any moment where something went differently than the old story said it would? Drop a comment if you've had even a glimpse of the ceiling being gone. Let me bring this toward its landing now, with something solid, something real, something worth carrying past this moment. You are in the middle of something significant, not approaching it, not preparing for it, inside it. The role you play in your own story is actively changing. The understanding you carry of what is possible for you is actively expanding. The version of yourself that is emerging is not a fantasy. It is the natural result of real growth that has been happening in you through real difficulty over real time. And the impossible that is beginning to show itself is simply what becomes visible when a person has grown large enough to finally see past the limits they inherited from a smaller version of their own experience. You have grown that large. Not perfectly, not without the marks of everything it took to get here, but genuinely, measurably, in a way that is now beginning to express itself in what is available to you, in what you can see, in what you can reach, in what you can be in the spaces and relationships and opportunities that are now presenting themselves. Breathe. Let the impossible be possible, not as a concept, as a lived reality that is already beginning, already in motion, already showing its first edges in the texture of your current experience. Stay present to it. Stay curious about it. Stay committed to the version of yourself that is emerging, rather than retreating into the safety of the version that was easier to maintain, because the version that is emerging is the true one, the one that was always underneath, the one that the difficulty was always preparing, the one that the impossible was always pointing toward, and you are already becoming it, whether you fully believe that yet or not. It is already happening, and it is not going back. I don't sell futures, I build architects. No predictions, just the raw truth for the tough ones. Stay magic, stay in the now.